Hi, dear listeners. This is Kate Riga. I'm here to make a quick pitch that you consider becoming a TPM Prime member. TPM has used the member model for over a decade now, and our loyal members are the only reason we've been able to weather the turbulence of the media landscape and avoid the fate that has befallen so many other independent outlets. For $70, you get no paywall, fewer ads, access to the Hive member forum, a members only newsletter, and more. For $140 a year, you get all of that plus no ads at all. Without our members, there is no podcast, not to mention that I'm out of a job. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us. We couldn't do it without you.
Hi, this is Josh Marshall, and this is the Josh Marshall podcast featuring Kate Riga. Slight difference today. We are recording on Tuesday, August the 26th, even though we said we would be recording on Thursday, August the 28th. Slight change in my schedule because, as I think I told you in last episode, this week we are taking our older son to college. So anyway, those things, logistics change at the last minute. Just wanted to explain our change of recording day. We'll be back to our normal Wednesday going forward. These are just kind of like one time scheduling changes, but we've got a lot to discuss. And I think we're just going to jump right into this because this happened last night. It had been sort of signaled, in the way things often happen in Trump land. You see some sort of kind of hints and then threats. Oh, I can definitely do it if I want to do it, and then people come forward and start like cheering Trump on. And there's actually one part of this I want to get into, which has to do with where the accusation came from. But anyway, Lisa Cook is one of the Fed is, as much as in the political world we kind of know about it, it's still something that beyond we know there's a Fed chair, but the Fed chair is not like the president of the Fed is a chair, sort of like the chief justice, kind of, in the sense that that person has more than chief justice, but still there's a Fed board and you have votes, and the chair basically is the leading voice, but there's other votes. So Lisa Cook is one of these other votes, and as we know, President Trump has been doing everything he can to assert control over the Fed. He's repeatedly he demanded the Fed chair Jerome Powell resign. He threatened to fire him. They got lucky where this one a person on the Fed board stepped down early. So he's got that. And then a few days ago, he started threatening to fire this woman, Lisa Cook, on the pretext that someone came up with accusing her of mortgage fraud. And under the rules, just as with FBI, the director of the FBI and actually the chairman of the Fed, these people can be fired for cause. That means some clear misbehavior. You're convicted of a crime, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So last night he purports to have fired her. And I say purports because, I actually mentioned this on social media. We need to get away from saying he fired her and saying, oh, bewailing it. Oh, this is terrible, whatever. What he's doing is illegal. So we shouldn't grant that it is a fait accompli. I believe she has said, I'm just catching up on the news this morning. Kate may have some even more breaking, details on this. But overnight, she made clear she's not going anywhere. I'm sure this will be contested in the courts, and that is where we are. So, Kate, what's your take on this?
Yeah. So, as you said, we kind of knew this was coming, right? And he needs to boot her so he has a majority of appointees on the board. And he's been pretty explicit that he is only looking for kind of loyalists who want to lower interest rates. That's the whole game here, right? And we've seen this before. I mean, um, other presidents sparingly have tried to pressure the Fed, and it usually manifests as trying to keep interest rates low, especially heading into elections,
Yep.
because they don't want to kind of have to eat it for people being angry about high borrowing rates, which is also, of course, why the Fed is independent, right? Because you need to have a body that can do unpopular things like raise borrowing rates that would kind of kill the career of a politician.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what's I think there are really interesting things here in the immediate term and in the longer term. The immediate term to me is, how does the Fed itself act now? Does it, as you were saying, you were posting on social media, like, do they act like she's fired, or do they say, hey, this is business as usual, come on into our morning meetings, Lisa, because you're not fired, right? And we all kind of know that's how it is.
Yep.
So that'll be interesting. On the one hand, I think, whatever Powell does, right? He's kind of the de facto mouthpiece. So it'll be interesting to see how he acts. But then, kind of inevitably, this is going to go to the Supreme Court. She's already got the legal representation of like a high powered DC lawyer who's doing the whole, this is a bullying campaign, this isn't real. Which will be fascinating, because as much as the Supreme Court has rubber stamped the decimation of independent agencies, they've even, up until kind of the present, they've added this little mealy mouthed, oh, but the Fed is different, it's historical, it's not the same. And they're doing that because people, including, business conservatives, want the Fed to be independent, because having your central bank be subject to political whims is, economic death. Like, you want to understand why rates are being raised and lowered, to have some kind of ability to predict when they probably will be, and to have those decisions made not on the basis of someone's reelection campaign, right? So, and that's kind of the one line in the sand that the Supreme Court has held so far with independent agencies. And you knew, even when that was coming through in these other decisions about the National Labor Relations Board, that it was a matter of time before Trump was going to say, thank you kindly, and now I'm going to take over the Fed too, right? So we might have the most kind of direct headbutting that we've had there yet. And we have to get into how Lisa Cook was, quote unquote, fired, because this, I think you were alluding to this at the beginning. I mean, it's just insane, this mortgage fraud thing, right? That you've got this nutcase working in the, I don't even freaking know its name, because I never heard of it before this, the FH something A, they deal with
Yeah,
mortgages and stuff.
it's I believe I looked into this because I think we're actually going to do a story on this guy. Um, yeah, it's like, the Federal Housing Oversight Agency or something like that. I'm pretty sure it's a post global financial crisis
Okay, that makes
agency,
sense.
as part of, as part of what we then called Wall Street reform, all those 2009 2010 reforms.
Right. And this guy's Bill, are we saying Pult? It's Pulte.
I thought it was
Pulte.
Pulte, but that was just, I think, what I came up with in my head when I read it the first time. So it could definitely be Pult. It's spelled
You know
Pulte.
there
That's
there are
yeah.
listeners who are screaming through their
Yes, like, what are
headphones right
you doing?
now.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
okay, we'll say Pulte. You can yell at us if we're wrong. But so he's the guy who's in charge of this, and he's like hardcore Trump guy, like has the ear of the president, which is like fairly bizarre for this agency. Neither of us really knew what it was until this moment. But it's super clear what he's doing. He has some kind of enemies list that he's going in and telling, the Freddie and Fannie investigators, here are people we would really love some pretext to go after or remove them from their jobs. And we know this because this has already happened to Schiff and Letitia James before
Yep.
Lisa Cook. And so then they're pulling their like mortgage files and accusing them of mortgage fraud, which in all of these cases seems to be basically the same thing, which is if you have two houses, you get a better mortgage rate on one of them. So sometimes people are, say that this one is their primary residence, and then also say this other one is the primary residence to try to get breaks or whatever. And, as far as I can tell, this is usually finable behavior, right? When people get caught doing this. But all of these people have been referred to the Justice Department for criminal probes, which, is safe to say is pretty unusual. But I mean, it's Nixon's IRS enemies list, right? Like, they are just delving into the vast troves of kind of personal data that you have access to as being the federal government, and trying to find the flimsiest pretext
Yep.
to boot these people out of their jobs. And as you said, I mean, the for cause thing with Lisa Cook, what they're talking about here is like gross misconduct on the job, right? And so he had to go kind of dumpster diving to find some misdemeanor something that he can say, I got my cause. She's out of there.
Yeah, in a lot of these cases too, these are, um, uh, I wouldn't even go. We shouldn't. To be clear, it's not at all clear that any of these people did anything wrong. It's one of these things where they are, you know, there are the U.S. government has a bunch of tax laws that favor home ownership. That kind of incentives for home ownership. So your first home, you get a small kind of federal guarantee. It makes the loan a little safer for lenders. So again, it's a small tax incentive. It's not technically tax incentive, a small incentive for home ownership. But the U.S. government says we want to we want to make it easier for everybody to own a home, but not 9 homes, right? So you get it on your first home, not your second home. So that's where this issue comes of primary residence. Generally speaking, what they seem to be doing here is looking for the stuff that on its face might suggest that you're claiming 2 primary residences, but you actually have to look and say, like, were they doing that at the same time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in each of these cases, what they are doing is they are not making any finding. It's just this guy Pulte is just putting it out on Twitter. Oh, we found this, we found that, and then announcing these referrals. All of this stuff it's possible that one of these people claimed 2 primary residences, but we absolutely don't know that. But the system is they claim they found something, and they may have found something. Who knows? They put it out on Twitter. It becomes a news story, and they make a referral, which anybody can make. And suddenly, here's where you are. I mean, it's so corrupt. I can't say it's shocking because it's in Trump world.
Totally. And with the Cook one in particular, we have reporting that, the investigators didn't even finish their dumpster diving into her case before he was like, yup, on to the Justice Department, on to Twitter, right? I mean, it's the barest possible pretext.
Yeah, and with the other thing with this, if I looked a little into this, and it is a fascinating in addition to being so corrupt, because it shows you the different how things work in Trump land. This Pulte guy is the heir of one of the largest housing producers of housing in the country, big mega company that builds houses. Okay. So he got the job as basically the head of mortgages. Well, that's convenient. And then somehow, and maybe Kate understands this and I don't, somehow in that job with the, with the federal acronym that each of us are barely sure what the words are, he then made himself head of Fannie Mae and Sallie Mae, the federal mortgage, semi-public, quasi-public, quasi-private mortgage and student loan things. I don't understand how that part happened. So he's doing that. He is openly running to join the Fed. Okay, so he finds the stuff on Lisa Cook. He wants to be on the Fed. He even apparently wants to be Fed chair. That seems like I mean, since he's just a kind of like a housing guy as opposed to an economist, that seems a little out of the ordinary. But here's the big thing. Okay, I found out about this guy, I don't know, a month ago. Someone first kind of let me know what was going on with him. And so again, what is it that, the FHHF or whatever that acronym is, I found out, okay, Bill Pulte, he's the head of this. And I'm like, okay, interesting. And this person tells me, yeah, he's like really big on Twitter. He's hardcore Trump guy. So I look him up. He has 3 million followers on Twitter. Now, if you don't know this world or follow these things, that is an insane amount of followers for a Trump appointee who you've never even heard of. Just to give you like a point of reference, and again, not that I know these things offhand, but I looked this up a couple days ago. Don Jr., the president's son, has 5 million. So this guy who the head of the mortgage whatever, right, has 3 million. And I look at this a couple times and I'm like, do I have the right guy here? How is this guy, who is some obscure mortgage administrator guy, have this many followers? And I still don't exactly understand how that's possible. But the point is, he is like a hard, by day, he is head of the mortgage agency that Kate and I have never heard of before. And by day, he's like some hardcore Twitter warrior for Trump. So how is this possible? I still don't know exactly how it's possible. But the point is that you have this nexus between social media prominence and being an appointee. And it has created this dynamic where he has all your personal financial information. Lots of people have mortgages, right? Certainly everybody in any prominent position, they're going to be somewhat affluent. They've got a mortgage on something. He's got all your data. He can dip into it, find a couple threads of information, and then go on Twitter and make it like you're guilty of a crime. And suddenly the president can fire you. I mean, it is a both deeply perverse and fascinating at the same time.
And, just to also emphasize the fact that now Lisa Cook has to kind of do legal battle over this. And she doesn't get to do that as a member of the Fed. She has to kind of take this on in her individual capacity, which is absolutely part of this, because this is how you guarantee that a lot of people who have been in her position, but maybe in kind of less, high status standoffs,
Yep.
have said, yeah, fuck that, right? I'll resign early. I'll walk away. Another member of another Fed governor resigned her post 5 months early. And, it's the same kind of thing of like, well, do I want to spend the next however many months, in court having my mortgage and financial documents raked over? Like, what if, God forbid, you made a mistake on something and all of a sudden you're going to have the book thrown at you, right? Like, that is absolutely part of this calculation, as is the fact that she is the first Black female Fed governor, right? That just another data point that kind of strengthens the case. There's a reason that of the 3 people they've gone after for this ridiculous mortgage fraud stuff, 2 are Black women who are his enemies, and then the third is Adam Schiff, who has earned himself a special kind of place in their inner circle.
He's an honorary Black woman for
exactly.
for the Trumps. Yeah, one thing I'll mention too is that I believe she's an academic. She was appointed. I think she was maybe at Michigan State or something. Not that I knew this before a few days ago. I just kind of looked it up, what her background was. Certainly most Fed chairs, and I think many Fed board members, they're bankers. So, Jerome Powell is I don't know exactly, but he's going to be a wealthy guy, right? He's a banker. He's a high end, not a teller, right? He's a banker. So he's a rich guy, but she's an academic, and academic economists make decent money for academics. But the point is that I'm sure Jerome Powell could probably fund, if this happened to him, and he has to pay, as Kate said, has to pay for it out of his own pocket. For Lisa Cook, she's in financial terms, I think, a normal person, right? So it's not nothing that you've got to that you have to fund. How long does this go on? And probably, let's keep in mind, she has to fund both the constitutional case to hold on to her job. She may also have to fund a civil or criminal case if they if they go after her. So it's a lot.
It's, I mean, this is not even an interesting comment, but it has gotten so bad. It was bad before, but it it just really feels like we're in the midst of a big escalation right now. That
I
it just
agree.
kind
I
of
agree. I agree.
I think it just brings home, maybe I just didn't fully appreciate before, like, the might of the federal government and all the different levers you can use. Like, who among us would have been like, oh yeah, the federal finance housing administration is gonna be the kind of stick against Trump's enemies and Trump too. It's just there are so many nooks and crannies and different
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm. Mhm.
leverage points that a malicious administration can use.
This gets us in, and maybe we'll kind of jump around in the schedule here, though. But one thing I have thought about a lot in the last several months is that one of the long-standing arguments, conservatives, I was going to say old style conservatives, but I think that's giving people too much credit. Conservatives have always had this argument: you make a federal government that's really powerful, it can do bad things. The power to do the things you like is the power to do bad things too. And that is, there's some theoretical truth to blah, 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 blah. Here's the thing: I have been following politics long enough to know that, yes, there is a certain truth to that. And it's always, always the same conservatives who actually do it. Yes, they do have an insight into the sort of human nature and nature of political power, and they are the ones who do it. This is not the first time. It's again, that, as Kate was saying, for her point, I'm not sure. I'm not looking for a Pulitzer for that insight, but it is a truth so powerful that it deserves some focus. And on this came up, and this maybe is a segue into your story, even though we're kind of departing from the schedule. The federal government is unbelievably strong, and this is why it's supposed to be hedged in by a lot of counter powers which are not operating, and that's kind of where we are. This occurred to me, or I had this funny kind of counter to my instincts thought a few weeks ago, when one of the latest things happened with the universities, when it kind of all settled down to, we know the score now. Each university, there's a price, literally there's a price. It's almost like a kind of a menu that they've got in the Oval Office. You've got to pay 500 million. You've got to pay 1 billion. It's all coming down to that now. You have to make a big payment for all the problems to go away. And everybody says, oh, they're giving in, they're complying, they're becoming complicit, all this kind of stuff. And look, 100%. I mean, I've been saying that for 8 months or whatever it is, but I had this counter thought, like, it's a little unfair. No one can withstand the full onslaught of the federal government alone. It's impossible. The federal government is too powerful. So as much as I hate it, like, sort of, I think of it kind of institutionally. Universities are very strong. They're nothing in compared to the might of the federal government. And we on the outside are thinking like, hey, you've gotta stand strong. You can't, bow down or knuckle under. But like anybody facing that might, they don't, if you can kind of pay something and live to fight another day. And again, I'm not really justifying these decisions. I still think all the things I think, but it allowed me to see it from another perspective of just, it is the fault here is the larger political society, because no one can really hold out against the full might of the federal government. And this, Kate and our colleague Josh did this story yesterday about the University of Michigan medical system, which basically in Michigan, the University of Michigan medical system is, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's basically the medical system for a lot of the state. Um, and Kate, I'll let you kind of introduce the story, but it gets at the question of, can you really withstand the full might of the federal government?
Exactly. Yeah. So the story we broke yesterday was that the statewide hospital system had come under immense pressure and targeting from the Trump administration. They had received a subpoena that threatened, criminal and civil investigations, uh, pinged or pegged to gender affirming care for patients under 19. And to be specific, this hospital system had stopped any surgical care for trans minors back in February. So this new thing was just targeting hormones, puberty blockers, that kind of thing. And it's exactly what we're talking about with Lisa Cook, right? It's the hospital system is worried about having to fend off the investigation, to be kind of have to spend and spend and spend to fight it. And they're not even sure what they're fighting, right? Like a source told us that DOJ lawyers had indicated abuse of the doctor's prescription powers, right? And like everyone kind of agrees all this legal stuff is pretty flimsy, but doesn't mean you don't have to fight it, doesn't mean it can't kind of bankrupt you. And then for the individual doctors, there's the massive threat that they could lose their medical licenses, right? Or and then have to fight to get those back or lose them for any amount of time, which is also their livelihood. So I think it's a little there's two separate things going on here. Like I have far less sympathy for the kind of um the hospital system itself than the individual doctors, right? I mean, it's what you were just talking about, how it's hard to kind of feel too bad for like Columbia because you're like, well, you've got a lot of money, right? You've got a lot of status, you've got a lot of prestige. I it's much more understandable when kind of a doctor who does gender affirming care is like, I've got to keep my practice versus, one of these big kind of vaunted institutions. But
And
it's all
can I
yeah, go
just
ahead.
make one quick, just for so our listeners are clear, the 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 subpoenas that they sent to this hospital system about these doctors directly threatened the doctors themselves with criminal prosecution. So it's not just keeping your license or kind of administrative kind of stuff, to put the individual doctors in prison if they continued this care. Just to make clear what the individual doctors were facing.
And the thing is, this isn't even new. Like they're kind of taking their abortion playbook and now using it on doctors who do this kind of trans healthcare. I mean, we've long lived in a world where, I mean, for a time, doctors who performed abortions, and particularly late term abortions, were murdered, right? Were targeted with death threats, who had their clinics bombed. I mean, that is a part of the history. But either way, you were kind of relying on this handful of individuals who are unusually brave and willing to, kind of put their face out there and be like, yeah, I'm the doctor who does this. And I'm not going to be cowed by these kind of threats. I mean, you go back and read, especially in, um, the summer where you had 3 different doctors who perform abortions being murdered in a matter of months, that kind of presaged the FACE Act under Bill Clinton. And those guys were wearing bulletproof vests to work. I mean, it was just, the right has experience with this. They know how to chase everyone but the staunchest providers out of the healthcare space, because they make the decision that it's not worth dying. It's not worth my family being threatened, right? I am a trained doctor. I can make my money in something else. And then all of a sudden, you know, that field of care suffers immeasurably because you've got like 3 people in the whole country who are
Yep.
willing to do it, right? And they're replicating that here. And there's so many details that are similar, right? Now we have huge swaths of the country, including, and this is what I think is kind of the most important part of our Michigan story, blue states under blue state governance that will no longer provide the care, right? I mean, it's just another lesson that being in a blue state isn't enough. It doesn't protect you from this administration. And so now we have these huge, we used to call, well, we still do call them abortion deserts. And now it's like gender affirming care deserts, where the places where you can get this treatment are shrinking, 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 shrinking. And that's, of course, kind of double important for the nature of the beast, like the nature of this kind of healthcare treatment, especially when we're talking about, minors who are totally immiserated, right? And are kind of desperate for help. And much like abortion, now it's going to be the province of the wealthy, people who can afford to go to, New York or California or wherever it still exists to kind of get care.
And even there, like, it's not, uh can they do this in California and New York? It's not clear why they, not clear that they can't. It's not, this is, just for listeners' clarity, um, they're focusing in, because of the particulars of Michigan, again, University of Michigan hospital system is where I think maybe a majority of the state gets healthcare, through all healthcare, not just talking about gender affirming care, all healthcare through that hospital system. And for gender affirming care, I believe it's 70 or 80% of it is through that. Actually, I think the main hospital in that system. Um, the fact that the fact that it's an academic affiliated medical system, it's big. They're obviously going after University of Michigan in general. The point is that they could easily do this at just a private hospital in California or New York. And it's funny when this was a big exclusive that Kate and Josh got. So I was sharing the story on social media, and I noticed, universally the response to this story on social media is that, the hospital system, they're cowards, they're all the stuff, a lot of anger. And believe me, I get that anger.
We got a lot of reporting around here, but it's just, we have seen, there's reporting about similar subpoenas to the one Michigan received in Pennsylvania and Illinois, which are rendering the exact same results. So
Yep.
that's a part of this as well. It's you can understand why people capitulate, of course, right? Like, you can, in almost every case we've had, you understand kind of the personal side of it. But I want to say that when everyone's capitulating, that begets more
No,
capitulation, right?
court, absolutely,
And I'm
absolutely.
not even talking about in Michigan's case in particular, but and this is something that has kind of been driving home to me being in, occupied DC, because it's something all my friends keep saying, is that they feel like total despair and isolation and powerlessness, and then something happens where a big group of people in Columbia Heights chase ICE out of the neighborhood, right?
Mhm,
Or there's some kind of mass protest, mass mobilization, and everyone keeps citing those things as
mhm,
the moment where
mhm.
they feel like all hope is not lost. And I think this is that at a larger scale, that you
Yeah.
need people and institutions, Lisa Cooks, if you will, who kind of
Mhm,
say,
mhm,
no, fuck you. I'm going
mhm,
to fight this
mhm.
at immense personal cost to stiffen the spines of some other institution. So I think that's a piece of this as well.
No, I 100% agree, 100%. And again, it's sort of for me, it's sort of like the universities thing. I mean, that has sort of been my kind of biggest argument over the last 8 months is kind of like universities are at the center of what civil society is. You can't allow them to be broken. So it's and that remains my thought. It was more of a, sometimes you have your dominant thought, but you have a moment where you kind of like, okay, yeah, I get the other side, and it's sort of like that to me. I mean, my general understanding of it is that the legal case that the DOJ is outlining here is very weak. Very. I mean, look, gender affirming care is not illegal in the United States. Congress could pass a law. They haven't. It's not illegal. But when you are on the receiving end of this, you kind of, I think you look at it and you say, it's the DOJ. How confident am I in the courts in this country that the law is going to matter and that I won't end up in prison? So that's a part of it too. I will say, I've only seen some clips so far from it, but I've had a number of people refer me to this speech that JB Pritzker gave. I guess it was probably in Chicago, somewhere in Illinois, yesterday, about what's being, and we're going to talk about this in a moment, that Trump is telegraphing he's going to do now in Chicago. What did he see? And maybe it was the day before yesterday. I either heard or read some comments from him, and it was this. You've heard these kind of words before. It's sort of it's almost like a script where the public official said, "There's nothing here to justify a takeover. Crime isn't this bad. This is not. This is unnecessary. It's not necessary." And I mean, man, you say that those are such wussy words. Like, what are you talking about? That's like saying, like, you watch Rocky and you say, his name is Sylvester Stallone. That whole story is made up. They were pretending to be Rocky and Adrian. Like, what are you talking about? In any case, yesterday he gave this speech where he's like, we will not allow this to happen. If anybody in this state is harmed or injured for the rest of my life, I will track you down and you will be punished. And people, to Kate's point, people hear that and say, fuck, yes, yes. We may have very little power now, but time is long. You will not get away with this. We will hunt you down. We will punish you. We will make sure justice is served. And people hear that and think, fuck, yeah, I'm not going to put up with this.
I know. I'm like, as bad as this is, I'm almost kind of like rubbing my hands together for the kind of Pritzker chapter of it, because we talked last week about Newsom and DC and everything. But the thing is, Muriel Bowser is not going to run for president. So her
She's,
personal political incentives are
yep,
different, right?
yep.
Like, at best, the highest office she'll achieve is she'll probably run for a DC Senate seat if DC ever becomes a state, right?
Yep.
And that is
Yep.
so, at this point, like asterisk, asterisk, asterisk.
Yeah.
So, but Pritzker is clearly wants to run for president, right? And he's had to kind of sit on his haunches and watch Gavin Newsom become like the toast of the left these past few weeks, be like the first one who's actually fighting and, kind of pioneering a fun uh, communication style bit messaging campaign type thing. And, now it's about to be Pritzker's turn, right? He's going to be in the spotlight. He is going to have a constant platform to respond and to campaign and to audition and everything else that we're talking about. And, you would just think that any aspirational 28 Democrat worth his or her salt at this point, the obvious part of the playbook, right, is aggression. People want to
Mm-hmm.
see you fighting. And,
Mm-hmm.
and he's someone who that's been a lot of his political persona thus far, right? Like he hasn't really hung his hat on being one of these like uh kind of squishy, like backslappy centrist guys. Like his shtick is more being the kind of like, he's kind of a good old boy. He's confident, he's powerful, he's from a rich family, he takes punches,
A real
like
billionaire, as he says.
right, exactly. So yeah, so I thought, that it was interesting that that was kind of the opening salvo to the next chapter of Occupation. Even though I just want to add this as well. Where I live in DC, there are about 30 National Guard, like right around my house every single day. And they are literally just standing around in clumps of like 4 or 5, just kind of like shooting the shit with each other. They'll saunter up and down the wharf.
Now, okay, so you said wharf, so it gives us a
Mhm.
sense of kind of very specifically. They're at the street corner. They're walking up and down the street. What are we?
Yeah, so for listeners who don't know, the wharf is like, it's the southwest waterfront of DC, but it's beautiful, right? Like tourists often come there. It's all restaurants, it's all pedestrianized. There's cafe tables and stages for musical performances and that kind of like fountains. Like it's very nice. And that is where all of the guard have been every day, just like taking strolls up and down it together, and it's just when like how much money this is costing. I mean, putting aside the whole, troops being like turned against the citizens type thing. Um, it's just staggering how much they're not doing anything because they've been deployed to an area of the city where a Miller Lite is $9. It's not exactly like a pocket of desperation and crime,
Mm-hmm.
And now, and then it's now they're all armed, right? That just happened. Now they suddenly all have these pistols that famously are known
Go
to
off a
like
lot
fire
accidentally.
unexpectedly. Yeah. And my husband's an Army veteran, and he was telling me how, to train up like National Guard on a new weapon is like a huge amount of, or supposed to be a huge amount of time and money and resources. Not to mention the fact that most people in the military don't ever carry pistols. It's like pretty unusual. So you have that layered on top of the fact that we know that these ones just kind of explode sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's to the obvious point. It's not a conventional military firearm. It's you're not going into battle with. I mean, with a handgun. I mean, I know I'll get all these emails. Yes, I know there are situations and certain kind of soldiers carry sidearms, blah 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 blah. But to Kate's point, it's not. This is modern warfare, etc. What is? I'm still kind of curious with the go off. I mean, this is sort of like in the world of guns. You have one job: go off when fired, don't go off when not fired. So I don't know what that is about. Do you know with the people who are in your neighborhood now, are they DC Guard or are these these ones that are being brought from seems to be in all cases from the South, which is a whole other issue. But
Yeah,
who
I
they
don't know.
are,
I gotta learn how to read their stupid patches because it's not obvious at first glance
they're
to
not
me,
wearing
but
sandwich boards.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
But, it's just interesting kind of tracking it because the other entity that I've seen around here is DEA.
Yeah.
Um, and it's interesting how different the category of person is. Like, all these National Guard people, for the most part, they're kids. Like,
Yeah.
they're like 19. I
Yep.
mean, they are all so unbelievably young. And then the DEA guys, what you'd expect for federal agents, right? They're middle-aged, they're like, you know, have have the big insignia and all and everything. And so far no one who's been around here I've seen has done the face covering thing that really seems to be the province of ICE and particularly expanded ICE. And
Hmm.
that's what's been interesting to see is almost all the ICE activity that I've been able to, hear from kind of firsthand accounts has been Northwest, Columbia Heights ish area. Just a lot up there. That's where my friends have seen apartment raids going on and like have seen ATF going into apartments and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, which is just kind of interesting because
It's not
just
where
if
I'd
you're
expect it.
right. And if you're trying to kind of like in terms of what segregation exists in the city, it's just not an obvious target there. There's like
Yeah.
Columbia Heights is like very gentrified, right? That's like a lot of like young professionals. That's kind of the hub up
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, and maybe you're like, well, where are you most likely to get protested or to like
Hmm.
manufacture some kind of clash? I don't know. It's just an interesting data
Yeah,
point.
this is I mean, just for those of you who haven't spent a lot of time in DC, and my knowledge of DC is uh, shockingly from like 25 years ago, but at least historically in DC, Northwest DC is tends to be white DC, transplant DC, and well, that kind of the wider part of the city, political people, people who are transplants, and then it's outside. Now, DC has changed a lot over the last 25 years. Lots of areas gentrified stuff. I mean, my I was talking to someone yesterday about this, and my sense is that probably where the rubber kind of meets the road in terms of the kind of the harshest stuff happening is the nexus between ICE and the Metropolitan Police Department. I mean, we know about ICE. We know police departments internally generally want to cooperate with ICE, and you've always got people in police departments who want to, get rough, won't do, kind of are held in tension with the civic authorities in a city. But now Trump runs the MPD, and to a great extent, he's probably giving rein to what a lot of people in the MPA wanted to do all along. And you put them in ICE together, working in concert in immigrant heavy neighborhoods, probably also, heavily African American neighborhoods. That's where I would expect the worst stuff is happening. But as you say, Kate, I mean, it's also, I don't know, you find Antifa headquarters in Columbia Heights, and who knows, right? I mean, there's it's also one kind of side point on this is that this also gives you a window into federal law enforcement. FBI especially, but also DEA. These are pretty professionalized organizations. And historically, ICE has been the place where if you can't get a job at the FBI or DEA or ATF, you go to ICE because they'll kind of take anybody. And the standards are very low. And that's kind of that's one of the reasons, you know, I'm sure in the past there have been good people in ICE, some, but again, its reputation is the place where you go if you're not really qualified, but you want to rough people up, and you go to ICE, and obviously um, that has that's being accentuated as they're basically offering to hire anybody to join. But my point here was, I'm curious, when you have ATF, DEA, kind of they're all working together, what kind of uh, uh, conflicts there are, because again, these other places are much more professionalized than ICE. So I'm wondering what they are getting, what they're getting involved in.
I mean, it goes to this larger thing, which is I have no sense of how quote unquote competently the occupation is being planned or managed. Like it's not at all clear to me if, like, as we've been talking about this, whoever is kind of the
Running
company
this.
commander of all these people has an awareness of the composition of DC neighborhoods, that people are being sent places with much intention at all. I mean, you almost get this sense, especially with the guard, because there's just a shit ton of them here now, that they're like, okay, well, 40 of you go to the wharf, right? And so there's a lot of people standing around there, and then you have the people who are standing around at Union Station, and just there's so many, and it's not that big a city, that it's hard to feel a great sense of intentionality with any of this, especially because, per reports, the kind of more still and, well, the whole city is historically Black, but the still very Black neighborhoods have
Hmm.
seemingly had, across the river, Ward 7 and 8 have had less of this federal troop activity than other parts of the city, which, like, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, kind of knowing the ideology of this administration.
Hmm.
So, I mean, the whole thing just feels a little bit scattershot.
Well, you definitely all, even from within the administration's ideology, it points in a bunch of different directions. On the one hand, you want to sort of, turn the tough guys loose on the Black and brown neighborhoods, right? That's clearly in line with their ideology. You also want to, like, show up in where the biggest opportunities are to own the libs, right? That you've got, as I haven't been there, but it seems like you've got just a bunch of National Guards kind of camped out around Union Station, the train station, with kind of Humvees parked and standing around, and whatever. And that's clearly there because you want the people who come in on the Acela to see that you're there. And that's that's under the that's on the owning the libs checkbox, that this is an occupied city, and we're in charge. So you've got these different, I was, on kind of, knowing the neighborhoods and stuff, that I would think it really comes down to how much this is plugged in through the MPD, because the MPD knows the neighborhoods. They know the place like the back of their hand. So, and also, what level of compliance are they getting there? You've got all these, kind of all these different things together, and it's a good question, because I would imagine you have some people in the MPD who, it's like, okay, let's use the extra manpower and try to, clamp down on drug sales in this place, and, kind of, at least, maybe not the kind of police work that you would favor, but police work. You know, our job is to stop crimes. We've got more people. Let's do this. Let's do that. You've got other people who are basically like, this is an ICE operation. We're going to find as many people as we can to deport. And then you've got others who are, this is a media operation. One other thing I did want to mention here, and this goes to the point we were saying before about Chicago. I think this is going to be a big, and it's a scary issue going forward. The big thing is that outside of DC, the president cannot nationalize a civil police force. That cannot happen. However, we know that in a lot of big cities, in some cases in especially big cities, that the composition of the police force politically is very, very different from the civilian population. Very different. You've got these very anti-Trump cities where the police force is pretty Trumpy. So I think we're going to have a big question of when you get to the point where a mayor or a governor says, you know, A, you're not cooperating with ICE, or B, you are going to require that ICE identify themselves, show back, are these police forces going to listen? Are they actually going to do that? That's a big question.
Yeah, and I would like to add here that progressives have been demonized for multiple election cycles now for Black Lives Matter and for abolish ICE, right? Those have both come to be regarded to varying degrees as kind of toxic positions, like that defund the police, I don't know, somehow brought down the campaigns of like Biden and Kamala, despite the fact that both of them, said fund the police, whatever. But that's in the bloodstream, right? Like people think that that's true. And it's just worth taking a moment to recognize that the problems and the threats that progressives were pointing out by targeting, police and ICE as these kind of dangerous, easily corruptible, if not corrupt already, institutions that kind of systemically reward this idea of, warrior policing, right? Like you're doing battle against the people you're policing rather than, the kind of more community oriented ideas of law enforcement, that they were right, and that you can trifle with how it was marketed or, to what degree a one off kind of lefty slogan, the right and mainstream media were very quick to adopt as the kind of institutional democratic position. But I mean, they were right about the institutional rot in both of these entities. And now we're like, this is coming to a head, right? And who are being the first people that you really have to fear as kind of the, the enforcers of the administration's agenda, and it's this out of control ICE that is just kidnapping people into vans. And now, as you say, as we get to cities that have control over their own governance, does anyone have a lot of confidence that the police are going to kind of stand up for the people they're supposed to protect and serve? I mean,
Or,
it's scary.
or to put it in a different way, simply follow orders. The I think we all know from, experience and history in so many cities, uh, um, police forces are, civil paramilitary organizations that work for the civil government. And their job is what the civil government says their job is. And they are completely under the control of the civil government. But we know that is not the self-understanding of a lot of police departments. It never has been. And we know this. This is a standard part of the world we live in. And I, going back to the point that I've been making in the editor's blog over the last few months about state authority, and in this case, obviously, cities are subdivisions of states. You are going to have to really push that for all it is worth of the sovereign authority of state governments, and again, city governments being inclusive within that. So you're going to get to points where police organizations are in conflict with each other. Maybe not literal, like, armed conflict. But one of the things that I have been thinking a lot about in recent weeks is, look, it is a basic thing. Federal law has supremacy over state law. Both of these things are true at the same time. So your police department, if the FBI shows up in your city, your police department can't say, hey, back off. This is our city. It doesn't work that way. Okay. But we also know that ICE is going into area, or what we think is ICE, going into areas with masks on their faces, not showing any insignia, not identifying themselves. I hope we get to a point, and I think we'll get to a point where state authorities will have to say, you need to identify yourself. Until you identify yourself, we don't know you're the federal government that has a superior authority in policing terms. So we're not going to stop you. We can't stop you from doing, what you're doing in most cases, but, that's fine print. But you need to identify yourself. We need to see a badge. And now, again, those kind of situations can get weird pretty quick. And those are the kind of cases that I'm describing where what are police departments going to do when they get those kinds of orders that are not, like I said, not battling, but this is kind of built into the fabric of our current situation. You're not a federal officer if you come in an unmarked car without uniforms, without badges, with your faces covered, without warrants. We don't know who you are until you identify yourself. So your federalness doesn't count until you identify yourself. So I really do think those are some of the things that we have coming before us.
How fun.
Yeah, good times.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Second show back. We are so glad to be back. And we will, as I said, just scheduling issue coming to you a day earlier this week, back to the normal Wednesday episode next week. We can't wait. And I think that's all we got for this week.
All right. See you next week.
Later.
The Josh Marshall podcast is hosted by me, TPM reporter Kate Riga, and TPM founder, editor-in-chief Josh Marshall. The show is produced by Jackie Wilhelm. Thanks to Why Not Jansfeld for our podcast theme song, and thanks to all our TPM members who make this possible. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe wherever you listen.